That don't bother me. That don't bother me.
Yes, it's OGP, the One Giant podcast, coming to you on a Wednesday. I'm losing track of the days because I'm doing too many episodes trying to cover the raging success that will soon be the New York Football Giants. And of course, along with my co-host, Andy Makowitz, we get back, frequent flyer on the podcast. Haven't seen her in a while. She checked out. It's Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC. And before we get into anything specific, I also saw in your profile, 999. Are we on the airways? Are we talking radio?
I am on the air now. I fill in from time to time on 99.9 The Fan for our ESPN affiliate here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So yes, I get my dabble a little bit in the radio talk.
Good
yes.
Lord. Wow.
Yes. Thankfully.
You know what? Clean it up, Andy. This is a big deal for us. It's just got even more important. This has to go really well right out of the gates. Fantastic. Well, if you're not, as we said before, I mean, Andy follows, went to Syracuse. He follows college sports much more closely than I do because I didn't go. I feel like if you went to a large enough school in college, then college sports carries with you after. If you went to a rinky, Division II, Division whatever, AAA, I don't even know. See, that's what I'm talking about. I didn't go to a big enough school to know the rankings. Then it just has a little bit less impact, but obviously great for ACC coverage, sports coverage in general, and then ultimately the Giants. Andy, but just Andy, let the people know that you are in fact here because I've been running some solo episodes, so you do exist. You're a part of it.
I am here. I'm down in Florida right now. Took the family down from New Jersey to try to stay warm and enjoy the hot weather because I know it's like 15 degrees right now in New Jersey. And Adam, every single morning, if I'm ever homesick, I just look up at Alexa. I go, Alexa, what's the weather in New Jersey right now? And they're like, in New Jersey, it's 13 degrees. I'm like, okay, perfect. I'm good wherever I am right now.
I thought briefly you were going to be like, Alexa, play the One Giant podcast. And you listen to like a solo episode from me and you just hear my voice and it, warms the cockles of your heart. Neither here nor there. Listen, let's dive in with the state of Cooper. When we talk about the New York Football Giants, you follow them as a pure fan. You've been a fan your entire life. But where were you as this season was winding down and really the offseason, let's just be fair. We all kind of knew that Gettleman was going to be on the way out. Everybody wanted that. At what point did you check out on Joe Judge? Was there ever a balance sheet for you where like, hey, the team is bad. The organization is bad. It's all bad. So it's hard to zero in on any one individual. And yet I think Judge made a really strong effort to get himself out of there.
I don't know if it was the speech that he gave when he wanted us all to buy in still or say it's really hard out here for a pimp. I don't know if it was the 3rd and 9 or the quarterback sneak. I don't know if it's just watching the different stats. Like after every post game was like, this is the first time in Giants history where they've lost by double digits and blah, blah, blah. Like to me, Joe Judge was just never a smart choice. I think anybody who leads special teams is great. They have a special role in the NFL, but I don't know if they are supposed to be the one at the helm. And so I already had my reservations, but then it just confirmed when he came in and nothing changed or got better, not even in the slightest, right? Daniel Jones, for whatever he is, it just didn't get better. So there was no improvement on any side. And I think that, we have some moments and flashes. I will say, as much as I talk junk about Dexter Lawrence, he did improve a little bit. I will give him that. He got better.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So in a bad season like this, you start to hone in on certain guys. And I remember, right? And I think you were right at the time to say, Dexter Lawrence, like, hey,
it's time,
guy. You're 17 overall pick in the first round. Like just because they got 2 of them and we happen to have picked a franchise. Well, we thought a franchise quarterback at the time doesn't mean that you get to work in the shadows. He did step up. I was really big on, man. And I remain big on him. We're going to get to some free agents later on in this episode if we can. But Lorenzo Carter, I thought, man, contract year. What a weird time to really start to ramp it up. But you saw the benefit for some players and some personnel with Azeez Ojulari there. All of a sudden you say, oh, yeah, if this is a more complete NFL level roster, some of these guys that you even just look at as being contributors can have more success. So it's like underneath this cloud and mire of everything that's going wrong, that's what we kind of got into towards the end of the season was here's a couple guys that are looking pretty good. They might be valuable.
Yeah, you know who stayed the same, though? Sterling Shepard. Same guy. Every time. Without fail.
Candace, one of the things...
There are some... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that you mentioned about Joe Judge, like when did you check out on him? Because I think that's the real question. Because for me, at the end of the year last year, he did exactly what would rile up the fan base and get us excited, where he's like, my team will never quit. I will never do what Philadelphia did. And he actually, his bravado made us rally around him. We're like, that's our coach. We love him. Yeah. But then over the course of the season, to your point, it just started grinding on us that he was so positive or tried to it was almost like he was gaslighting us.
Yes. Yes.
Something's happening on the field and we're like, did they just QB sneak it? He's like, yeah, and we got an extra yard of field position and they punted afterwards.
Idiots.
And you're like, and it makes you feel like you don't know what's going on, when in reality you're like, wait a second, that was the first QB sneak on 3rd and 9 ever in the NFL. So like when you think about it, it's like, is he really that smart? Or is he just that out of touch with reality? And I think we got our answer.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It was just one of those situations where overall it's okay to not be the guy. And I never want anybody to get fired, but I also feel like everyone should know their role and play it well. And that being a head coach is a lot. Not only do you have to know your X's and O's, but you also have to be a leader of men. And I don't feel like the team really bought in. Saw a little progress, but still 4 games as opposed to 2 games winning. Like that's not what the Giants are known for. We're not even sniffing a playoffs. We are at the bottom of the barrel. Like people are laughing at us. I would wear a clown suit to a game. Like that's where we're at. And I don't ever want to feel like that about the Giants, right? So I was able to like dust off my Justin Tuck jersey. Like, okay, I don't have to put it away. I don't have to hide it and we can just try and regroup. But I think there's a lot of questions going into the offseason, especially about personnel, in the C-suite that we really have to address, because I think that's the biggest thing. It starts up there.
It's funny to think about too, because coming into the year, we said, remember, look around the division, right? Well, the Cowboys, if they're healthy, obviously they have the talent to be successful, but you lump the Giants in with Washington, with Philadelphia. And that was, to me, was always the barometer here about the gauge of it. Not only that you had an extra game and you still won 2 less than the year prior, but really it was, I'm sorry, did Washington, their plan was to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And by the way, I respect that guy way more than I think the NFL does. Like, I think that like people get some type of weird idea about who he is because he's been a journeyman quarterback his whole life. But you choose to go forward with him. Okay. But he gets injured. You lose offensive linemen. You lose your crown jewel on the defensive side of the ball. Still competitive. Like up until the last 3 weeks of the season, 2 weeks of the season, you had an opportunity maybe to get a wild card spot. And by the way, when you're Joe Judge and you're throwing shade at Ron Rivera for whatever he is, been around a long time, had a lot of success in this league, went to a Super Bowl. Like, this is the thing where from a fan base perspective, it's like, dude, we're not even on par with some of the teams that we thought were in our division that were kind of trash with us. Or look around and go, that we only won 1 more game than the Houston Texans, right? Like, you understand what's going on here. Like, and or the Detroit Lions as well, right? The Detroit Lions are in a better position for all the shade that people threw at Dan Campbell. He's odd behind the microphone. But guess what? People buy into it. And the one thing that came out was Joe Judge. A lot of the players, once they knew he was fired, said a lot of the quotes were, love him as a person. Mm-hmm. Not so sure. It's hard to follow a guy that keeps trying to drill home these same things over and over again. You're not seeing results. So I think that's actually what saved Joe Judge a lot longer than anybody would have anticipated, including with John Mara. He's like, when I talk to the guy, I want him to do well. I like this guy. We all like him. Also, horrible football coach.
Being sweet is great, but that's not what this is. It's a business, and a lot of people's jobs are on the line by what you do. So you kind of have to be a little bit more hard nosed. And I don't know, it's very much a gauge, right? You go from a Tom Coughlin to a Joe Judge. Where's the middle, right? Someone who like will punish you if you're 5 minutes early versus somebody who probably is like, well, did you give it your all, buddy? I think we got to find that happy balance.
Andy, when we talk about, go ahead, Andy. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say about Joe Judge, and all these things come out. People love to kick dirt in the media. Adam and I were talking about this earlier about how people are mad that they waited until Tuesday instead of Monday to make the decision. That the latest thing that's come out is that Joe Judge didn't text his coaching staff. He has his assistant text his coaching staff, being like, Joe's no longer going to be the head coach. You guys can meet up and sing Kumbaya tomorrow. See you later. And they're like, for all the we're a family on the inside, like Joe Judge, doesn't even individually text his assistant coaches or just give them a heads up himself. And I don't know, did that rub you the wrong way, or is that just like, who cares? Let's move on.
I think it's like professionalism is always going to be one of those things that I pride myself on, wanting to love somebody for. So if you can just be a man before you are a head coach or whatever, I respect good character. So I think that's really crap, but we also don't know if it's true or not. Everyone has their stories. So if it is true, that's really crappy. But if it's one of those things that people just want to have a rumor, fine. But I also look at it from a player standpoint, they probably could care less. So if they don't care, I damn sure not caring. I will say though, when you look at the Patriots coaching tree or Belichick's coaching tree, rather, as much as I love Brian Flores, I'm a little shaky. Like, I was rooting for him. And then I thought about it, I slept on it. Right. And I'm like, okay, so this tree the branches are a little bit flimsy. And I don't know if he's the next guy or the right, but I've heard that he's a little bit hard-nosed. And so maybe that's what the Giants need right now. They just need to go back to what we're used to. And that's, a Tom Coughlin-esque type of coach who is no nonsense, who can say we are an historic franchise for a reason. We're not some bums off the street. Maybe every now and again we make playoffs. Maybe every now and then we compete for a Super Bowl. Like, no, this is supposed to be a consistent thing.
By the way, yeah, Bill Belichick's tree looks like kind of like a Who Killed My House plant. Like that, a little bit of that vibe going on these days. And to your point, it's like Flores, when he first got fired, it was like, whoa, like what's going on here? Now, again, everything is the message that you receive, but all indications were behind the scenes, you're clashing with your GM. And you can disagree about it, and I can disagree about whether or not Miami should be lockstep tied into Tua, right? I don't know if that's the right franchise quarterback for you, but right. If you're Brian Flores and you've rotated through your own coaching staff, you're firing guys, you're switching, you're changing all these things, like that's probably the biggest red flag. But the biggest concern I would have is like a guy that's going to come in, maybe say the right things in the interview, and then immediately turn around and go, I don't know about all that though. Like, the Giants can't afford that probably as much as I think that Flores did a great job with the Miami Dolphins over the last few years. Andy, on that front, just hit one of your key kind of GM possibilities for the New York Football Giants, because I'm curious to see, Candace, where you stand as far as who you'd like to see tied in, connections or lack of connections to the organization, and just the overall mentality that the Giants want to bring in with this new regime.
Yeah, so I think the first one, the hot name, and this has been reported for the last month and a half, that the Giants have internally been saying if or when Dave Gettleman retires, this is the type of guy that we want to bring into the building. And that's Joe Schoen, who's the assistant general manager of the Buffalo Bills. Don't know if I'm breaking any earth-shattering news telling that to Giants fans who've been following the Dave Gettleman saga. But listen, Joe Schoen is a guy. The reason why I like Joe Schoen as a GM candidate is he's done it in multiple places, right? He's been in Carolina. He went down to Miami. His Miami connections. Bill Parcells is the one that hired him and was like, he was the smartest guy that I interviewed, and that's why I wanted him here. And then he moves back up, and he worked with Brandon Beane back in Carolina a decade and a half ago, and Brandon Beane was like, I want this guy as my assistant GM. When you see it happen over and over again, where like smart people are like, I want smart in the room, that's where I start to get excited about a candidate, as opposed to maybe someone who's been in the same organization for 15, 20 years, underneath someone who's absolutely amazing, and you don't really have any knowledge if they're the ones that are pulling the strings. So for me, Joe Schoen seems like a really, really good candidate for the Giants. Young, super smart, like, grinding it out. He's flying on Wednesdays and Thursdays to different colleges, still doing scouting as the assistant GM. Candace, I don't know if you have any insight specifically on who you'd want or the type of GM that maybe you'd like for the Giants, but would love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I've seen his name as well as Quentin Harris, I think from the Cardinals, be out there. And, I actually was thinking about Louis Riddick. I know that he had been in conversations before, maybe had taken a step back.
Don't do it, Candace. Don't.
But by the way, here's the problem, because this is what I say every time someone says Louis Riddick, and like brought him up, and I go, yeah, but this is the guy that wanted Dwayne Haskins. Like, that's always the thing that I go. And by the way, that is very disingenuous that I have tied myself to a guy who was part of the player personnel for the Eagles and helped build up their Super Bowl team. Like, I know that the dude has a track record, but that's all I can think is like,
one mistake.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, one time. By the way, if you have one verbal hiccup on this podcast, Candace, I will never invite you back. No, continue.
So, I think that, guys like Quentin Harris, you see what they've done with the Cardinals and how they kind of built that up. I don't know that Cliff Kingsbury was ever going to be a coach that maybe takes you all the way. So, I mean, you can pick as many people as you want. But I do think, he's another up-and-coming guy that might be someone to consider. Whoever it is, I'm all for someone with fresh eyes. I think, one part about being a historic franchise, people are like, oh, the old thing, it doesn't have to change. But maybe someone can be a part of what a new wave system is and understands these new guys and how they're different from, the old guard where they're so hard-nosed and they just football. You have to also invest in players and, personalities and all those things. So I think that would be my biggest thing to consider, is like not only being smart, but also can you, see the whole player human holistically and be able to, put that, correct locker room together, because a lot of changes need to happen on, both sides of the ball, really.
I want to get into some of those players. Go ahead, Andy.
Specifically, I think Candace is just trying to butter me up. Did you specifically say Quentin Harris because he's a former Syracuse Orange? Is that what you're trying to do for me here? I know we have the ACC connection, right?
He's actually like a family friend.
Oops,
and so I've been like, trying to like put people out there in the universe that like could connect me one day. So like, if it helps me to help him, right? So like, if you're listening, I feel like I have a direct connect to the main man. So I'm just like, if you're listening.
There's an end goal here that Candace is trying
I
to
love
get clear. That's why I've often recommended Tim Armbrecht. Okay. Unrelated, not my father, but I just think, listen, a guy who retired from being a will and estates attorney might be the next GM. It could be an opportunity.
There you go.
Quickly, before we get into the player side of it, do you, from a GM perspective, do you look at guys like Shane, who then it's linked to having the offensive coordinator come with him potentially? Do you look at those opportunities as saying, if it's a GM that's coming from an organization where they have a coach in mind they want to bring with them, is that better? Is that more important for you? Or does it not matter if you're just saying, if it's a quality GM, we can look out across the landscape? Because obviously there's a lot of talented coaches out there, but Shane being the example, since it's been the big name, to me, you look at it and go, well, he's been running in that organization. So is Dable, the offensive coordinator. Now you know that they're in line, at least on the idea of what type of system we want to run. And you would like to think that they've been putting personnel in place together. So when you come in, the evaluation process, the scouting process, the drafting process is going to be two minds on as close to a similar path as possible, as opposed to bringing someone else in and saying, okay, where do we meet? Where do we align?
No, I completely agree. I think you already have someone in mind, because if you're a smart guy, you know what you want when you want him. You're just waiting for that opportunity to kind of present itself. And as long as they get in there and evaluate that Daniel Jones is not the guy, I am for that. So as long as the first statement is we're going to evaluate all talent when they get there, I am all for whoever gets chosen.
So let's get to then Daniel Jones, because I want to do. There's a handful of free agents that I just want. There's this list, and it's a little bit surprising in some ways that my gut reaction to the list of names from the Giants. But Daniel Jones, are you all out? Are you done? And do you think, because originally prior to Joe Judge being fired or any of these things happening, and I probably still stand by it, that you can go into the fourth year of Daniel Jones and say you're on the roster. I think you need to do everything necessary, whether it's in the draft, and it looks like you're probably better off saying second round or maybe sneaking back into the first round if you like a prospect, but bring in a veteran experienced quarterback, a guy that could beat him out in camp or could just come in and take over, but don't obviously pick up the fifth-year option on Jones. If he blows our doors off and he's healthy and he looks great. We snuck it by. We managed to save one. But short of that, this is just Daniel Jones playing out the string here.
Well, listen, we saw Daniel Jones really be the type of player who wants to do it all for his team. I commend that, right? You're willing to get knocked out. You're willing to get concussed. You're willing to do whatever you can to try and get your team to win. I appreciate that. However, I mean, I'm an ACC girl from the Duke. You got the pipeline of Coach Cut. I understand all of that, but he's not Peyton Manning. He is not one of the Manning brothers. And let's just have a, honest conversation about that. I think he's going to be a great journeyman. I think he's going to be one of these guys who is able to make a lot of money, being able to back up when needed. He is not your he is not your quarterback. He is not QB1. Russell Wilson, if you're listening, come on in.
Yes. Okay, let's derail this then. Are you of the mind that you would want the Giants to trade for Russell Wilson? Would you want
absolutely?
See, I completely disagree with it. Because
Sierra loves the Met Gala. Sierra loves New York. She wants to bring in the new year.
No, sorry. Let me just clarify. I said, do you want the Giants to trade for Russell Wilson? Not do you want them to trade for Sierra? I'm not saying it's not talented.
Package deal.
Super Bowl.
This is the female me talking. This is a package deal here, okay?
My pushback on that is that because it's not about Russell Wilson, but this again would be, this to me is like and we want to be back and be competitive right now. But when you look at the roster, you go, well, you still have 3 holes on your offensive line. Like at best, you have 3 holes if Shane Lemieux comes back and he's healthy and can contribute. I know Nick Gates just announced he's committed to returning to football, but you can't put a lot of stock in that. You're still so far away in that regard that bringing in Russell Wilson just seems like you can look at Seattle right now. Offensive line is struggling. It makes harder job for him. Now, listen, what's the bar that we want to set here, Andy, for the Giants to be competitive or close to 500? Sure. But I don't think that you can commit that type of money to that position, specifically about that. If Russell Wilson wants to come in for $5 million, You know what I mean? If he wants to restructure himself so we can still build around him, then I'd be for it. But the financial commitment makes it really hard to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, Candace, that's the tough part for me is I love me some Russ. Like, I love Russell Wilson. I think that he has covered up warts that Seattle has had for a very long time because of his scrambling ability. His deep ball accuracy is arguably the best in the league when he launches that thing up to lock it. I love watching him play. I root for him. I would love him to be a Giant. The two issues that I have, the Giants are strapped on cap space. They only have a couple million of cap space. So to be able to fit Russell Wilson's cap number when you trade for him, it means that you're going to have to release players that could actually contribute on this roster. And you're going to have practice squad guys, veteran minimum guys fill out the remaining piece of the roster. And then the second piece is you're arguably going to have to give up 2 first-round picks at minimum for Russell Wilson, which means you'll lose one this year, you'll lose both this year, or you'll lose one this year and next year. And the Giants not having cap space and not being Russell Wilson away from being a deep playoff threat, I just don't want a GM, like an older GM. I feel like Pioli or Louis Riddick will trade draft capital, try to be relevant as quickly as possible, and just try to sneak into playoffs. I think the Giants are so broken that this needs to be like systemically built from the ground up, and they need to take all their draft picks and build with young, cheap talent, trade back, continue to accumulate assets, as opposed to cashing in the chips when you have no cap space and not a lot of talent on the roster.
Sorry, I was just watching. It's like, no.
Don't you feel like Reverend Russell Wilson can come in and pour into Kadarius Toney? He can pour in to these guys who feel like they might be good. They just have been under the radar. And he's like, this is your time to shine. Like, to me, like you said, what he did in Seattle, he probably made people be superstars who were duds because of that's his spirit. I don't see Daniel Jones leading a locker room, but hell, I see Russell Wilson, and I would buy into whatever he's selling. He's been to the Super Bowl. For one bad pass, he would have 2 rings. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, the dude's legit. The dude's legit, and that's the hard part about this, being like it's as if saying I don't want them to trade for Russell Wilson means that I think Russell Wilson's a bad quarterback, right? Like, I would do it, and I'll even, because man, so many fun things to talk about. Would you, if you wanted to accomplish that goal? Because we went going back to last offseason when the Giants signed Kenny Golladay. I said it then, I stand by it now. It was a massive mistake. You paid a man that you weren't competing against anybody else on the market for, and you paid him like a superstar wide receiver coming off an injury year, has more injuries. He was runner-up in Ernie Accorsi's Good Guy of the Year award inside the Giants organization. So, I mean, I know that he's a good player. I know that he can be better with better quarterback play. But if you wanted to accomplish, let's say, the goal of getting Russell Wilson, would you come in as a new GM and be like, listen, we got to get off this Kenny Golladay contract. There's a world where we need to get off the James Bradbury contract a year before it's too late because he's going to be in his 30s and quarterback play starts to drop off there. Like, are you willing to jettison off a handful of those guys? And I'll even throw the Saquon Barkley piece in there too, because that's north of $7 million, right? Would you come in and deal with some dead cap money or sacrifice diminished return on the players that you're sending off just to be able to clear that room to be able to get Russell Wilson?
Yes.
Because that I can get on board with.
Bring them all to slaughter. Because I think at the end of the day, what have you shown me that makes me want to keep you right now? Like, what have you offered up to where like you are viable? You know, and maybe that's also to Daniel Jones' play. Maybe they haven't had the right personnel to make them look like superstars or studs. But I think with Saquon and his injury history, like as much as we want to say like he's back to the old Saquon or whatever, like okay, Sterling, however we can get him out of here, please, quick, fast, in a hurry. Like he's got to go. I don't care what we got to do, but the contract got to go. Wipe it up. You
know what's funny? I'll say, because I agree, it's just that's like just where it is, right? Like, Shepard, again, a lot of Giants players are just victims of being Giants players in some regard. Now, injuries play a factor in this. Oddly enough, if I went into this offseason, I was like, get off that Kenny money, get off, Bradbury. Again, appreciate you, but didn't work out. Maybe even it's like Logan Ryan, all these guys. Sterling Shepard, ironically, is one player that I think could actually sneak through because his money it's not good, but it's not terrible. And he actually, he's 8th all time in receptions on the Giants. Like, it's like he's this weird thing.
Adam, don't do this. Don't do this, Adam. Don't do this. Candace is right. I like Sterling Shepard. He seems like a really great guy.
Exactly.
He's a guy that I want to see succeed.
No, I get it, but I'm just saying. But if the only option you're going to have with Sterling Shepard is to take a dead cap hit and get off the money. That's the only choice you have. You're not trading for anything.
You can save money by getting off of Sterling Shepard.
It's not saving money. I've said this 1,000 times. It is not saving money. When people tell you if you cut him and you take a dead dead cap hit. You saved $6 million. You're not saving it.
You
You're
can
just
reallocate
not paying the full length of this contract.
You can reallocate money for the cap next season away from Sterling Shepard and to someone else, and it's about $4 million that you could do that with. And to be honest,
about $4 million. Fine, listen.
But listen, Candace is right.
I know she's right.
Healthy.
The one guy, okay. I will cut.
He
I will
cannot
cut the
stay healthy. He cannot stay healthy. So
exactly.
if you could save $4 million by cutting him, he cannot stay healthy. I will rather reallocate that $4 million to someone else other than Sterling Shepard, who will be on injured reserve next year, no matter what.
Listen, I'm embarrassed that I'm saying it. I'm just saying. Everybody, like, this is the thing. Everyone was like, Saquon Barkley. Why would you ever want to? I've been saying this. I said they should have traded Saquon Barkley last year. I was saying they should have traded Evan Ingram 6 years ago. Yeah, that's before they actually even drafted him. Like, he never should have been on the team anyway. So I know I have that problem. Let's get out of here on this. As the new GM comes in and as you look at this team, it was funny. You talk about the state of where this organization is, and there are some higher level guys like Sterling Shepard and bigger names you may need to move on for financial reasons. There's a list of unrestricted free agents on the Giants roster, and I dropped this thing all the way down. It's about 12 guys to Lorenzo Carter as being the cutoff. There's a whole bunch of scrubs after that. There's some scrubs above them. When I rattle off names like Lorenzo Carter, Penny, Reggie Ragland, Danny Shelton, Nate Ebner, Mike Glennon, Toaloa, Will Hernandez, and then even some guys that, like, in our minds at some point along the way have meant something to this team. Jabril Peppers, Evan Ingram, Billy Price, Austin Johnson, Nate Solder. There's some obvious things like Nate Solder. There you go. You finally get off that money. Any of those names, Candace? Any of those names mean anything to you in terms of like a guy that's worthwhile? Because I do have a couple, but the first step is like, hey, most of these guys aren't any good. And that's something. And a lot of these guys were playing reps for us. That's interesting.
Right. Jabril could go. I think Will Hernandez could probably stay. Everybody can plead their case to me.
Will Hernandez. Okay. Will Hernandez. I have been as Adam knows, the one guy on the roster that I've been like, the reason why Andrew Thomas looked bad was because Will Hernandez was playing next to him. You move Will Hernandez to the other side, all of a sudden Andrew Thomas is playing at an all-pro level. Like, he has been that, like, astronomically bad that Will Hernandez is the one guy, like, I will help him pack his bags and move along. But I can appreciate your feeling of not wanting to get rid of any lineman. Like, we need some kind of people in the room to be able to try to run block for our running backs, right?
This is I 100% agree. I think that's always in the recent years been the issue, is the offensive line. Like, even with Eli, he was always being rushed, and of course, not being his Eli of old, it definitely didn't help the situation. So I think that's something you have to take in consideration. But when it comes to just the list, I can't sit here with full faith and say, yeah, everybody deserves a chance, because no, what have we been dealing with for the past few years to where you guys are I won't say worthy, but are worthy of being a part of what we're trying to build moving forward. And so it's just one of those things that you have to have honest man in the mirror check when it comes to what are you going to bring to this new era for the Giants.
It's so funny. Before we got started, I had mentioned how, Lorenzo Carter in a contract year starts to really show a little bit. You were mentioning last time you had been on Dexter Lawrence and him needing to step up, and he looked like he showed it. Now, these are two different levels here. The one other guy I'll say quickly, I think Austin Johnson is like this low-level guy that you wouldn't hate, like, in your mind. He's low-level. I think that you can use him in a lot of different ways. I listened to an interview going back to the middle of the season where someone close to him was saying he actually is effective interior or on the outside, and the Giants have used him in a very specific way. I think he's a little more versatile, and you probably could keep him around and plug him in a new system and have him be effective. Maybe like a little steal there for the Giants. But Carter, even though he looked good, probably to his detriment, because whatever his value is on the open markets, like, the Giants aren't turning around and being like, what, 7-8 million? Like, no, we're talking about, you want to come back on a 3-year, $13.5 million, be a rotational player for us. So he maybe loses in that regard. And then even Dexter Lawrence, oddly enough, the new regime is going to come in here, and you're only a year away from needing to re-up him. So you have to make, hard decisions. We talk about this. Everybody, the critical eye has to be on every single player on this team, what their financial ramifications are of keeping them, and when is the best value point if you're going to restructure this thing. And that ends up with the overall idea of, are you a team that is saying, with a new GM and a new head coach, is John, God, I hope so. We'll get out of here on this. Is John Mara finally at that place of saying, I get it, I've made mistakes, I'm willing to acknowledge it? I totally dismiss this idea that fans are running around the internet acting like they're the ones that accomplished this thing. And if you think as a Giants fan that you were the ones that forced John Mara to make this decision, that's the worst possible case, because it means John Mara hasn't learned anything. Like the hope is that he looked critically at his own choices and said, I've made mistakes here. Let's try to get this thing right. Do you think that that's where John Mara is now, that he gets, if it has to go to the studs, it's to the studs, and we have two more bad years before it really gets fixed? Or does he think that I made mistakes with my last GM and my last 3 coaches, but now we'll get this thing right back where it needs to be?
Well, I think he had honest conversations with potential GMs that he's been interviewing, and they all said, listen, I'm not going with Joe Judge moving forward. So let's figure out how we do this quickly. I also envision the Instagram post from Dexter Lawrence saying, this is my first home. It's been real. So it's going to happen. It's coming. You have to just come with the new energy, new vibes, because you want to get back to what you're used to being. You want to get back to being that franchise that people feared. Nobody fears the Giants now. The fact that the New Orleans Saints are scratching their heads pissed off that they lost to the Giants is one of those things where that's where we've come as an organization. Like Daniel Jones saving the day. Who would have thought? Like, that's just not where we're at. So I think you have to just really reassess every single one. And I'm hoping that he does that, because that'll show the progress to me.
Yep.
I think one of the simple stats that keeps being reiterated on the internet and why Joe Judge ultimately has to be let go too is you look at Broncos, you look at the Bears, right? 2 teams, you look at the Dolphins. Those are 3 teams that all fired their head coaches that all beat the Giants by double digits this year. So like, if they're not happy with what's been going on and losing by multiple touchdowns to them, like, how could we even, like, with a straight face say, this is the guy that we believe in? And ultimately, I think the Giants, even though Adam doesn't want to give all Giant fans credit, I think there is a little bit there that's basically like former players were coming out, not happy with the product. The season ticket holders, there was, tickets on the open market for $6. They weren't filling the stands. They weren't eating concessions. They weren't buying Sterling Shepard jerseys.
They weren't taking that complimentary medium-sized Pepsi.
Yeah, no medium-sized Pepsi. They have a stack of cups at week 18 that they're like, we can't even get rid of these. What are we supposed to do? Now we're losing money on cups, Adam. So
yeah,
it's all good. It's all fair. It's all terrible. I'll just go back and edit out the part about Sterling Shepard. And then I think we really put together a good episode. I think we all came in here together. We made a lot of great points, a lot of positivity. We're going to come back in, as everybody knows, covering the GM search. Andy and I have got a slew more of candidates to get into, talking about what happens next on this roster. A lot more names to go through, including guys that we think are even higher profile that maybe shouldn't be here. But first and foremost, Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC, showing up on the 999 fan. Is that how that's how they do that, right? 999?
They say 99.9. It's okay.
Adam, just take that Sterling Shepard and your 999 and take today as an L. It's okay. We come back strong tomorrow.
It's all
there
good.
It is.
Candace Cooper, we appreciate you as always. Hopefully we do it again real soon.
Guys, thank you so much.